Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West, and we're going to continue what we've been doing since week 50 here on Third Age Thursdays, looking at the poetry and songs from The Lord of the Rings. At the end of last season, we looked at a few of the rhymes of lore, tall ships and tall kings, along with some Hobbit lore in Oliphant. This week, we'll take a look at some prophetic verse from Malbeth the Seer. In the chapter, The Passing of the Great Company, Aragorn has told Legolas and Gimli that he's looked in the stone of Orthanc, and that they have to move now to counter a grave peril coming unlooked for upon Gondor from the south. In fact, he explains that if that attack isn't countered, Minas Tirith will be lost before 10 days are gone. But he's saying this while he's in the Hornburg, which leads Gimli to say, lost it must be. But that's when Aragorn mentions the paths of the dead. Gimli isn't convinced, and I can't blame him, and he has questions. And that's where we pick up. Listen, this is the word that the sons of Elrond bring to me from their father in Rivendell, wisest in lore. Bid Aragorn remember the words of the seer and the paths of the dead. And what may be the words of the seer? Said Legolas. Thus spoke Malbeth the Seer in the days of Arvedui, last king at Fornost, said Aragorn. Over the land there lies a long shadow, westward reaching wings of darkness. The tower trembles, to the tombs of kings doom approaches, the dead awaken, for the hour is come for the oath breakers. At the stone of Erech they shall stand again, and hear there a horn in the hills ringing. Who shall the horn be? Who shall call them from the grey twilight, the forgotten people? The heir of him to whom the oath they swore. From the north shall he come, need shall drive him. He shall pass the door to the paths of the dead. Dark ways, doubtless, said Gimli, but no darker than these staves are to me. And I'm here to shine a little light on those staves. First, though, if we look at Skull and Hammond's Collected Poems box set, we learned that initially, and for the first 5 drafts, Tolkien had a very different version of the poem. I'm actually going to read the 5th version. It's a typescript that Skull and Hammond label E. In it, the prophecy is explained by Aragorn as, quote, an old rhyme of lore among my kindred, almost forgotten, never understood. It is but a broken shard of the rhymes of Malbeth, the last seer of our folk in the north. It reads, the days are numbered, the kings are sleeping. It is darkling time, the shadow grows. Out of the mountain he comes, his tryst keeping. At the stone of Erech his horn he blows. 3 lords I see from the 3 kindreds, halls forgotten in the hills they tread, elf lord, dwarf lord, and man forwandered. From the north they come by the paths of the dead. Interesting. All 5 of these earlier drafts had this idea of lords of the 3 kindreds, although this was the first of the drafts that was said to have been spoken by Malbeth. After this, Skull and Hammond explained, Tolkien almost entirely rewrote and extended the verse in a new manuscript of the chapter, and we see the abandonment of the 3 kindreds idea, and the out of the north applies only to the heir of him to whom the oath was sworn. It's no longer an old rhyme of Gondor, but instead a prophecy made specifically about an heir of the line of Isildur, and it's the first time we see anything about the forgotten people. Now this will sound familiar, but it's still not in the alliterative verse that we see in the final version. When the land is dark where the kings sleep, and long the shadow in the east is grown, the oath-breakers their tryst shall keep. At the stone of Erech shall a horn be blown. The forgotten people shall their oath fulfill. Who shall summon them? Whose be the horn? For none may come there against their will. The heir of him to whom the oath was sworn. Out of the north shall he come, dark ways shall he tread. He shall come to Erech by the paths of the dead. And again, it's still a rhyming verse. It's not alliterative. I'm going to go ahead and let Skull and Hammond explain all this. Although a relatively short work, the prophecy of the paths of the dead gave Tolkien more trouble than many of the poems in The Lord of the Rings. In part, this was due to his shifting ideas for this particular section of the book, which are reflected in the Rime of Gondor and the words of Malbeth. Early on, he decided that Aragorn would have something important to do in southern Gondor and would come to Minas Tirith unexpectedly. But the details of his journey by the paths of the dead, the summoning of the Oathbreakers at the Stone of Erech, and much else grew and changed in the telling, largely or wholly in the period between circa 23 September 1946 and October 1947. Now, early last series, we looked at Galadriel's messages, including the one to Aragorn that hinted at this particular event. But back when it was the Lords of the Three Kindreds, we had an entirely different message from Galadriel. Elfstone, Elfstone, bearer of my green stone, in the south under snow a green stone thou shalt see. Look well, Elfstone, in the shadow of the dark throne, then the hour is at hand that long hath awaited thee. Skull and Hammett explain, of this Christopher Tolkien writes, the green stone in the south was born on Theoden's brow, and it was Éowyn who would stand in the shadow of the dark throne within his hall. Éowyn, who at that point in the story's development was to be Aragorn's future bride. It was only after the change to this verse becoming the prophecy of Malbeth that Galadriel's message foreshadowed the Grey Company's arrival and the reminder that the dead watch the road that leads to the sea. Now that we have some of the very interesting history of this verse, let's take a look at it in-universe by getting a bit of backstory on Malbeth the Seer. First, a little word nerdery on his name. Mal is a prefix meaning gold, as in Malorn or the fields of Cormallen, according to appendix in the Silmarillion, while Beth is a lenited form of Peth, meaning word. Now, there are not a lot of other examples of this element, but there are two at least. Athrabeth, which means conversation or interchange of words, and one of the phrases that Gandalf uses when trying to open the doors of Moria, Last o Beth Lammen, meaning hear the word of my tongue. So golden word or perhaps voice of gold for Malbeth, again just implying the worth and value of what he has to say. Next, though we don't have precise dates of his birth and death, we do know the years that his two known prophecies were made, Third Age 1864 and 1975. Given that he likely wasn't a child or even a teenager when he made his first prophecy, it's clear he was of pretty strong Númenórean ancestry, as he was likely 130, 140 years old or more when he made this second prophecy. But let's break that prophecy down into chunks. The first chunk is the threat facing Gondor, the long shadow over the land reaching to the west, that is, coming from the east. The tower, of course, refers to the Tower of Ecthelion, while the Tombs of Kings is a reference to the Rath Dinan, the silent street in Minas Tirith, where the tombs of the kings were. The second part is about the dead. Their hour has come. They are the oath breakers. They're going to stand at the Stone of Erech. They're going to hear a ringing horn, and they will be called. And that's where they're referred to as the forgotten people. The third part is about the person who's going to call the dead. It's the heir of him to whom the oath they swore. Now, he'll come from the north in a time of need. He's going to pass on to the paths of the dead. And I want to do a quick bit on the name of the Stone of Erech before we wrap up. The name is described in Tolkien's Unfinished Index as being a pre-Númenórean name of a hill in the Morthond Vale on which was set the Great Black Stone of Isildur, a stone that Tolkien described in letter 297 as the Covenant Stone. I'm out of time for this week, but next week I am eager to get to the Rohirric alliterative verses that we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks, I think. Folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Be sure to come back tomorrow as we take a series and go back to the very beginning with First Age Fridays. Check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus weekly episode and more. Podcast listeners, subscribe to the TTT in your podcast apps. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel to get all of the PPP productions. And everybody, please be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.